Welcome back to Pace Immigration, paceimmigration.com, talking with immigration lawyer Michael O'Rourke. Michael, good to see you. You might have some bad news today, though, for those looking to purchase a house in Canada.
Hi, Sean. It's good to see you too. Yeah, there's some interesting legislation that Parliament passed that could affect home buyers and potential immigrants to Canada. That's why we're talking about this as well.
Right. So we've got here June 23rd, 2022. Parliament passes the Prohibition on the Purchase of Residential Property by Non-Canadians Act, which is as long-winded as sinister as it might sound too, with the non-Canadians thing. And it has here the act comes into effect on January 1st, 2023. Michael, why are they introducing an act like this?
So the idea is to follow the provincial acts that both BC and Ontario passed to try and cool the housing market and to open up a limited supply of housing in Canada for those resident in Canada.
Right, and you mentioned them here. I've got them. British Columbia introduced a 15% foreign buyers tax in 2016. They've since raised it to 20%. Ontario has followed suit pretty much along the line. 15% tax introduced in 2017, raised to 20% in 2022. However, this one is, I find it a little bit more targeted, a little bit more strict in the sense that BC and Ontario wanted to go the taxation route and maybe deter some speculation and some buying. This one by the federal government getting into the act now, no pun intended, is an outright ban on foreigners buying property.
Yes, it is. And it is quite a largely drawn ban as well.
Right. Let's get into the rules here. I've got some notes for you here. Go ahead and go through some of this.
Sure. So this targets anybody who could be considered a foreign buyer. The only thing that we know at this point, because the regulations haven't been promulgated along with this act, is that it does not apply to a Canadian citizen, a permanent resident of Canada, or a Canadian controlled corporation. The way that they have listed it is a series of double and triple negatives, but it basically comes down to a corporation that is controlled by a Canadian by a Canadian majority ownership.
Okay, so we have here that it affects non-Canadians who directly or indirectly want to buy residential property in Canada in force for 2 years. That seemed kind of odd to me. I guess they're going to take a look at it after 2 years. And what's your feeling on that?
Well, this is typical with restrictive legislation where they'll put a sunset clause into it. It just more or less puts it on their calendars to review the program, see if it's had any success, see if it is politically palatable still to keep it in place,
Right.
and whether it's doing anything.
Right. Well, let's talk about what kind of properties are affected here. This is mainly for, this isn't big money. Well, I guess big money nowadays with the Canadian housing market, it's all big money, but
Do you
we're not
live in
talking.
Canada, Sean? Jeez.
I know, right? This is why we're talking about this thing. So big money in the sense that we're not talking about like shopping malls and apartment buildings.
Right. So this applies to residential property. It does not apply to any apartment buildings that are over, say, 4 units and higher. It doesn't apply to a commercial warehouse or anything like that. It does apply to primary and secondary residences, though. So your cottage in Muskoka, your condo in Toronto, your single person ski lodge in BC. So it would apply to those type of residential properties.
Okay, let's carry on with more of what they've got. It includes purchases made through corporations, trusts, or other legal entities. I suppose this is so if you're a sole buyer, but you're trying to look for a loophole, you're not going to find it here.
Right, exactly. So one thing that we find typically in Canada is the use of numbered corporations, and often it is difficult to figure out who actually owns the numbered corporation. This act is aiming to be able to pierce that and determine the actual ownership of the corporation or trust or other legal entity to see if it is ultimately controlled by a non-Canadian.
People that might think maybe they're on the hook now because a foreign buyer won't be able to buy their property or something. There is a note here that non-Canadians can still be liable under a contract of purchase.
So, yes, up until January 1, 2023, we interpret this as anybody who has contracted for the purchase of a home who has become liable under the contract of sale will be able to complete the sale as long as that assumption of liability occurs before the effective date. If the assumption of liability occurs after the date, then they are potentially subject to monetary fines in this act.
Okay. We have here some except. I wanted to ask about exceptions. There are some listed on the government website. Talk about some people that might be thinking, "Whoa, are you kidding me?" And there are exceptions for them.
There are, but they're not really well defined. So, what we know who are accepted now are refugees and Canadian spouses of a foreign buyer. So, say you're a citizen of China and your spouse is Canadian, then you can continue on with this contract and with acquiring property in Canada.
Right.
But that's it for now. Uh, when this legislation was being discussed and argued at Parliament, students and temporary workers were considered, but they weren't actually included in the final draft of the act. So there are future regulations that are going to come out at one point in the future. That's why we're calling them future regulations. And maybe students will be included. Maybe temporary workers will be included. We just don't really know. So right now, there aren't many exceptions to this very broad definition of who is a non-Canadian.
Let's talk about something that occurs to me now. You know, Canada has put out there that they want to accept at least 400,000 new immigrants every year to come to Canada and be part of this great country. How does this square with that? I mean, you're putting out the welcome mat saying we want 400,000 people, but at the same time, you're saying, yeah, but if you're not a citizen, I suppose maybe they're saying, well, you have to become a permanent resident first or something, but it doesn't quite square with that, does it?
No, it doesn't, and it's it's a mixed message. Yes, we have a housing crisis, or so we're told all the time. Yes, we need and want more immigration to the country, but we do things in spite of ourselves here. You know, we can't seem to get people in professions to very quickly and easily acclimate to their professional body when they come to Canada. We take forever to process permanent residence applications, citizenship applications, even study permits. We have all of these stay away, but please come at the same time.
Right. Yeah. What's your feeling on that 2 years anyway? I'll put you on the spot, maybe force you to make a prediction here. You think after 2 years this act continues with an outright ban, or do you think they're going to amend it?
When's the next election?
Yeah.
Here's the cynical part of me saying this
Yeah.
might ride through until the next election. When this was mooted, and all of the political parties in Canada at the federal level did get behind some sort of foreign buyer restriction. I'm not sure if this will stay and outlast the current government or if it will be rescinded because there are these future regulations that we just don't know what they're going to include, and they will actually define this program broadly or narrowly. We don't know if the government might pull some strings here or there to make it sound a lot worse than it actually is in practice, or if it's going to be as broad and draconian, well, my view, draconian
Sure. Yeah.
way of looking at this, if that's going to stick. So
This one kind of flew under the radar, didn't it? I mean, I remember the Ontario and the BC stuff with the tax. That actually, there were arguments in the press. There was a lot. I haven't seen much about this yet. I have a feeling a lot of people are going to get quite a surprise on January 1st, 2023, when they go looking for property to buy.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't very well discussed during the summer, and it seemed to go on very quiet shadow docket. Something that's also interesting for not only the people who are targeted under this, but anybody who assists with the acquisition of property for a non-Canadian. That could be my colleagues in the real estate department, are people who do appraisals, notaries, real estate agents. So anybody could theoretically be ensnared in this monetary penalty scheme if one of the evil foreign buyers makes it through the net and buys something. So I think in its current form, it is very broad, and it is something that I'm hoping the current government, when passing the regulations into force, takes into account that this not only could have a dampening effect on house sales, which is what they want it to do, but that it could be a much larger tax, more or less, on those who are working here legally in various industries. So I'm also wondering if it might be subject to a challenge in the courts.
Okay. Well, something to keep an eye on. And definitely, if you are out there and you're thinking of buying property in Canada or you're unsure about the rules, be sure to contact Michael at mo'rourke@pacelawfirm.com. We also have a real estate department at Pace Law Firm, and they'll certainly be up to speed on this and be able to help you out as well. Michael, thanks for this. We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks so much, Sean. I always enjoy putting on another hat other than immigration lawyer extraordinaire. Yeah, it was fun to talk about this. And if I can't answer your questions, I have some brilliant colleagues in our real estate department who know this back and forth too.
Excellent. We'll catch up with you. We'll catch up with you again soon, but we'll catch up maybe on this subject. We'll talk about it again in January and see about the rollout.
Sounds great.
Okay. Bye, Michael.
Bye-bye, Sean. Take care.